Hello and welcome to an Inspector Calls finish in 5. This is our fourth extract and our fourth video. Just in case you need a reminder, the idea is that by working through a series of around 5 or so extracts from a text, you'll get a sense of the whole text, how it works, how it links together, and what happens. And during every single little video, we'll cover what happens before the extract itself, why the extract matters, and also what happens afterwards as a result. Now this is our fourth extract, so if you haven't done numbers 1 through 3, do feel free to go back and look at those. It is worth it. So in terms of what happened so far. Now after Gerald's interview, which is the one we covered in our third video, Gerald left the house, leaving Mr. and Mrs Birling and Sheila with the inspector. It becomes clear that Mrs Birling is next. Now, she denies recognising the photograph of Eva Smith, but it's not convincing. The inspector asks Mrs Birling about her involvement with the charity, and it's a charity that helps women in distress, and Mrs Birling acknowledges it. She's proud of it. Mrs Birling then attempts to avoid answering the inspector's questions, but after he hints at Eric's involvement in the whole thing, she admits having seen Eva Smith only 2 weeks before the events of the play. Eva Smith, it seems, came to the charity asking for help, but she used the name Mrs Birling, and Mrs Birling, the wife of Mr Birling, was the person who made sure that as a result, Eva Smith didn't receive any help. We do also learn that Eva Smith, when she went to the charity, was pregnant, but the baby wasn't Gerald's. So in this particular extract, we have Mrs Birling admitting turning the girl away, and also laying any blame solely at the feet of the father of Eva Smith's baby. Now Mrs Birling explains that Eva claimed to be protecting the young man who made her pregnant, that it would be wrong to marry him, and that she couldn't take any money from him. And of course Mrs Birling refuses to believe any of it. Was it owing to your influence as the most prominent member of the committee that the help was refused the girl? Possibly. Was it, or was it not, your influence? Yes, it was. I didn't like her manner. She had impertinently made use of our name, though she pretended afterwards it just happened to be the first she thought of. She had to admit, after I began questioning her, that she had no claim to the name, that she wasn't married, and that the story she told at first about her husband who deserted her was quite false. It didn't take me long to get the truth, or some of the truth, out of her. So why did she want help? You know very well why she wanted help. No, I don't. I know why she needed help, but as I wasn't there, I don't know what she asked for from your committee. I don't think we need to discuss it. You have no hope of not discussing it, Mrs Birling. If you think you can bring any pressure to bear upon me, Inspector, you're quite mistaken. Unlike the other 3, I did nothing I'm ashamed of, or that won't bear investigation. The girl asked for assistance. We were asked to look carefully into the claims made upon us. I wasn't satisfied with the girl's claim. She seemed to me not a good case. So I used my influence to have it refused. And in spite of what happened to the girl since, I consider I did my duty. So if I prefer not to discuss it any further, you have no power to make me change my mind. Yes, I have. No, you haven't. Simply because I've done nothing wrong, and you know it. I think you did something terribly wrong, and you're going to spend the rest of your life regretting it. I wish you had been with me tonight in the infirmary. You'd have seen... No, please, not that again. I've imagined it enough already. Well, the next time you imagine it, just remember that this girl was going to have a child. No! Oh, horrible, horrible. How could she have wanted to kill herself? Because she'd been turned out and turned down too many times. This was the end. Mother, you must have known. It was because she was going to have a child that she went for assistance to your mother's committee. Look here, this wasn't Gerald Crofts. No, nothing to do with him. Oh, thank goodness for that, although I don't know why I should care now. And you've nothing further to tell me, eh? I'll tell you what I told her. Go and look for the father of the child. It's his responsibility. It doesn't make it any the less yours. She came to you for help, at a time when no woman could have needed it more, and you not only refused it yourself, but you saw to it that the others refused it too. She was here, alone, friendless, almost penniless, desperate. She needed not only money, but advice, sympathy, friendliness. You've had children. You must have known what she was feeling, and you slammed the door in her face. Mother, I think it was cruel and vile. I must say, Sybil, when this comes out at the inquest, it isn't going to do us much good. I mean, the press might easily take it up. Stop it, both of you. And please remember, before you start accusing me of anything again, it wasn't I who had her turned out of her employment, which probably began it all. In the circumstances, I think I was justified. The girl had begun by telling us a pack of lies. Afterwards, when I got at the truth, I discovered that she knew who the father was. She was quite certain about that. And so I told her it was her business to make him responsible. If he refused to marry her, and in my opinion he ought to be compelled to, then he must at least support her. And what did she reply to that? Oh, a lot of silly nonsense. What was it? Well, whatever it was, I know it finally made me lose all patience with her. She was giving herself ridiculous airs. She was claiming elaborate fine feelings and scruples that were simply absurd in a girl in her position. Her position, now, is that she lies with a burnt-out inside on a slab. Oh, don't stammer and yammer at me again, man. I'm losing all patience with you people. What did she say? Well, she said that the father was only a youngster, silly and wild and drinking too much. There couldn't be any question of marrying him. It would be wrong for both of them. He'd given her money, but she didn't want to take any more money from him. And why didn't she want to take any more money from him? Oh, a lot of nonsense. Didn't believe a word of it. I'm not asking if you believed it. I want to know what she said. Why didn't she want to take any more money from his boy? Oh, she had some fancy reason. As if a girl of that sort would ever refuse money. So in terms of dissecting the extract, just like a husband, Mrs Birling refuses to accept any responsibility. And as an audience who have realised the structure of the play, the later revelation that the father of the child is Eric isn't much of a surprise. The inspector, however, points out that responsibility here is not simply about the pregnancy or even about money. It's about helping, it's about sympathising. Sheila, in her new role as a figure of moral authority, criticises her mother, and even Birling seems a bit unsure about his wife's actions. Mrs Birling, however, sees her actions as absolutely justified. She didn't start it, Birling did. The girl began by lying to the charity about her name, she's not actually Mrs Birling, and lied about what had happened to her, and the father of the baby is alive and he should provide for her. What's problematic, though, is Mrs Birling's absolute snobbery. Eva Smith couldn't possibly have fine feelings and scruples, and should certainly never refuse money, a girl of that sort, as Mrs Birling dismisses her. As an audience, even ignoring for the moment our dawning understanding that it's Eric being described, it's hard for us not to sympathise with Eva. She's protecting the father, a youngster, is trying to do the right thing by not marrying him, and doesn't want to accept stolen money. Notice the not marrying thing. Now this must mean that the father, Eric, was willing to marry her, or even offered to, which would have made Eva Mrs Birling. She has a claim to the name, and she's simply using the name of her baby's father. It's ironic that Mrs Birling punishes Eva Smith for protecting Eric, and also views her as immoral for behaving morally in protecting Mrs Birling's son. Now again, Mrs Birling shows her snobbery. Eva has some fancy reason. Mrs Birling didn't believe a word of it. What's clear is that Mrs Birling, helping at the charity, is more about an opportunity to reinforce her own prejudices than it is about actually helping people. And even worse than not helping is Mrs Birling's refusal to even attempt to sympathise with a young woman heavily pregnant and clearly in need of help. So just briefly, what comes next? Well, Mrs Birling finishes her interview with the inspector triumphantly. She thinks she's won the argument. It's Sheila who first realises what's happening, and it's the revelation of Eric's involvement that is exactly why Prissy reversed the order of Eric and Mrs Birling in terms of who is interviewed first. It's the later revelation of the link to Eric and the realisation that the dead baby was her own grandchild that forces Mrs Birling to engage emotionally, to feel guilt, to begin her own journey towards responsibility, although she never manages to complete that journey. And just quickly, as ever, a reminder about extra resources that are out there. There's the recipe books with loads of good stuff in them. There's the quotation cards to help you revise. There's a YouTube channel with hundreds of videos on all the different texts. There's the Twitter feed with that daily quotation. There's the net text guide available on websites and from your English teachers. And of course, there's the podcasts available through your Academy websites. And that's Extract 4 done, and I will hope to see you for Extract 5.